words. Whenever someone says they alone are good at something or they alone can fix something, almost all the time they're some sort of deranged asshole. Because there's billions of people. More than one of them can do just about anything. But for this evening, you are stuck with me, myself, and I alone, going through tonight's 7-game slate. It's interesting in that we're in that rare situation where we have almost all the teams on some significant back-to-back activity of some sort. There are 14 teams playing tonight. 12 of them played last night, and of the remaining 2, one of them plays tomorrow. So of the 14 teams playing tonight, 13 of them either played last night or tomorrow. The only team not so encumbered, the Dallas Mavericks, who are lucky enough to play this evening and not have to play tomorrow. I am reducing my volume so the notifications does not drive us crazy the entire show. I have already moved my microphone into the appropriate position. Now that I've got my coffee, it's time to watch Radar. Okay, so let's get into this. I will bang through the shows, give you some observations and conversation on each of the games, and then come back around again like the people of the Sun and try to discuss some of your questions and queries as we get closer down to lock. Hopefully I can do the 7 games in 35, 40 minutes, something like that. And then I'm setting up the YouTube chat browser. Again, I'm spoiled. I'm used to having one of our excellent hosts at awesemo.com handle the questions while I sit here and try to look smart. Now I'm going to have to handle the questions myself while I try to sit here and look smart. This a Herculean task. I shall do my best. Another great slate as far as relationship of the games to the start time. 7 games tonight, all of them starting within an hour of lock. That's pretty exciting. That also does mean that there's probably going to be some reasonable amount of news that we will have interest in as we approach lock. So premium chat especially, I'm counting on you guys to be my Jimmy Olsons out there. Let me know if I miss anything and save me a few seconds. Yeah, we did ban a couple people from the premium chat last night. Fake news, humorously on topic with my intro, not permitted. Don't be a bad boy. So last thing I'll say before we get into this more in depth is it is a night where I'm a little more concerned with security than normal. And what I mean by that is normally that's largely a cash concern, and about 80% of people who are playing these days really aren't playing any substantive cash, so security doesn't really enter into your calculus a ton. If you have a coach, there's a couple who are particularly renowned for resting guys on back-to-backs, or if there's news, certainly you take it into account when you're building your lineup. I don't know if I want to play this guy. He played 44 minutes last night, or I don't know if I'm going to play this guy. I think Casey may rest him, or something like that. But tonight it's really interesting because you had a couple teams that were able to, not play last night in the case of the Kings and the Mavericks, and then a couple other teams that got away kind of easy, like, say, the Celtics, who managed to put the hammer down quickly enough that we didn't give any appreciable minutes to many of the starters. And I do think that is a reasonable thing to keep in the back of our heads as we build lineups tonight, because, coaches in certain situations will be a little more inclined to cut and run than they might have been otherwise. Like when you look at the Bulls, for example, who I expect to be fairly popular tonight, Justin Holiday played 40 minutes last night. Ryan Arcidiacono, I almost screwed it up, but that's it. Ryan Arcidiacono played 40 minutes last night. Jabari Parker played 39 minutes last night. Zach LaVine got away with only 35, but you'd have to think that in some way negatively affects their chances of randomly banging out 40 again. So we will talk as we get into each of these games briefly about the exact load they experienced this evening. The first game we'll talk about will be the sole 7:30 game, the Rockets visiting the Cavs, which unsurprisingly is a game that has engendered a significant amount of fantasy interest. Obviously, the big news for the Houston Rockets is Chris Paul. He's getting old. He's going to take a day off, much like I do myself once in a while. And that obviously expands our interest into a number of other people there. And then the Cavs, we have a lot of interest in based on simply their price tags and the fact that the usage is focused on, let's cut it down to some number of guys with no Kevin Love, no George Hill, no Sam Decker, with all those injuries. So, and again, the Rockets, a better matchup now when you take Chris Paul out there. So even though they're on the road, everyone played back-to-back yesterday, the Rockets still favored by 10 or so as has been noted in the premium chat a couple times, it is interesting how completely gaga everyone is over this game when it features basically the lowest total on the slate. Again, those numbers have moved around a little bit. I haven't looked at them recently, but definitely not a robust total to say the very least. I think it's sitting around the 214 line, which is a little bit lower than all the others, I think. So first off, again, I'm not overly concerned with that. Over-unders, team totals, expected total versus pace, expected number of extra possessions. These are all fine things to look at, but you don't want to overweight them, and they should never overweight other relevant concerns. This is a Rockets team that already runs a very, very tight, basic 7- and 8-man rotation most of the time, and now it takes Chris Paul out of there, which is a giant chunk of minutes that need to be apportioned to other guys, and they're going up against a Cavs team that is, in every relevant statistic, the worst or second worst team in the association. 209 over-under, they're saying right now. Chris Paul coming out, lowering that of, obviously, 3 or 4 from the last time I saw it. So, yeah, I'd like it if they were playing faster, but you're still dealing with really, really centered usage and just so many minutes for the guys who are going to get out there and play against a truly woeful defense that some of these guys are going to be productive. There's literally, I mean, the fantasy productive guys we're talking about here are now going to be Harden, Gordon, Ennis, Tucker, and Capella, who are going to start. And then off the bench, you're already dropping down into the Gary Clark, Gerald Green. I mean, we're having to go deep here on this team pretty quick when we're figuring out who we're necessarily going to roster. So, those guys are going to put up probably 110, 115 points in this matchup, and some of them are certainly going to make value because outside of Harden, obviously, none of them superlatively expensive. Capella, obviously, priced up, not as much as I would have thought he would have been with how much he's been dominating recently. So let's break this down guy per guy. I won't throw all the numbers at you, but Harden becomes, much more superhuman, much more ridiculous, much safer floor, much higher ceiling when you take Chris Paul out of there. He just is involved in basically every play. He's out there with Ennis, who isn't going to create anything, Tucker, who isn't going to create anything, Capella, who really isn't going to create anything, doesn't even know how to do much in the post, really needs to move with someone else, and then Gordon, who can do anything he wants to by himself. That's fine. He can handle off the ball. He can do all sorts of stuff. But even the guys you talk about coming off the bench here, Gerald can act by himself a little bit, but Gary Clark really more of a defensive stopper, just a rookie. So he's just going to have a usage of, 47% in this game, some fairly ridiculous number. And again, there really isn't anyone on Cleveland we're worried about shutting him down. So even if this game blows out, it's going to be on his back, and it's really hard not to like James Harden. Now, that being said, there's some other studs in really nice situations tonight. Off the top of my head, I think Westbrook is in a situation where he has in the past dominated and can certainly do so again. And, you still have Durant without Curry, and those guys' ownerships are going to decrease with the news about James Harden. So I'm not into windmill 100% James Harden mode, but I wouldn't look at someone playing 100% Harden and be like, that's wrong. Like, you're looking at injury, ridiculous foul trouble, or some bizarre 3 for 29 shooting performance for him not to get 50 fantasy points tonight. Like, it's going to have to go weird. Or them blowing out the Cavs by 60, which can happen. We had the Mavs beat the Jazz by 50. You could certainly have something like that happen in this situation, but this is a Cavs team that, again, just managed to, talking about how anything can happen in the NBA on any given day. We just had these Cavs go into Philadelphia, where the Cavs had won 0 games on the road for the year, and Philadelphia was the last remaining undefeated home team, and got them with the Kardashian curse, and managed to pull out that game somehow. So trying to predict the blowout seems kind of irrelevant on both sides here. So Harden, not a ton to add there. He's not going to be stopped by Hood or Sexton or Clarkson, and he's basically going to get what he wants. I have no issue with any amount of exposure you want to have on Harden. That being said, he'll be, I'll say 60% owned. I'm going to load up the Awesemo ownership projections because I'm pretty curious. They are incredibly, incredibly good, and I'm curious what they currently have, James Harden ownership at. But it's going to be more than half. I feel pretty confident in saying. Okay, I don't see it at all here. Maybe I'm missing something. They aren't starting that slate late or something on DK, are they? Maybe I'm missing something. Oh, it says James Harden 13%. I think that's very, very strange, and I think it'll be up towards like 50%, but we will see what that looks like as we get closer to lock and they update those numbers. James Ennis, I like more on FanDuel than DraftKings because you have the possibility of dropping it. He's a guy who picks up a lot of steals. Steals obviously worth something extra there. The minutes I believe he played only 29 last night. Again, as I mentioned, I want to discuss the minutes last night when you're looking at each of these teams. So Detroit got the win last night and had to go into overtime to do so. So that's one concern you have with this Rockets team, but they don't really have anyone else to play at a certain point. So you got 41 minutes of Harden, 43 minutes of Capella, 44 minutes of Tucker. Only 29 minutes of James Ennis, so so you're getting 26 to 34 minutes for James Ennis. There's a pretty broad window there, but I prefer him more on FanDuel in any case. I liked PJ Tucker on either side of this. We had the 3 games going back. Whenever either Paul or Harden is out, he becomes a little more involved. Always has double-digit rebounds. Fairly likely, always going to play a metric ton of minutes. And if you go back and look at those 3 games or so from like the 26th of October to the 2nd of November, I think it was, you got larger games out of him, some based on, finding a bunch of corner threes, some based on just picking up a dozen rebounds. But at that number, one of the cheaper and relatively lower-owned ways to get some exposure to this game. This hasn't been a great spot in the past for Capella, has seen a fair amount of Tristan Thompson, hasn't performed that well in the past, but that's been the case several times this year, including over the last couple games, and he's continued to perform at a much higher level. Having Harden out and Paul in there does make me a little more concerned with Capella, but having Paul out and Harden still in there actually makes me like him a fair bit more. So I don't have any issue with you running Clint Capella as your cash game center. Obviously, we're happier at 7,500 on DK than we are at 8,600 on FanDuel, but would be odd for him to start letting everyone down now. The minutes have been real this year is really the largest single thing that's to credit for his improvement. So Eric Gordon is the real question here. This can go incredibly well or incredibly badly. If this is Eric Gordon last year, in this situation against Cleveland, his fair price would be $7,300 or $7,500. He's $4,500 and $4,800. The only reason to not play him tonight, and it's a good reason not to play anyone, is he's looked like shit. Now, he's got foot issues. I think it's plantar fasciitis, and if that's lingering, you're just a step slower, you're not elevating quite the same way when you're taking your jump shot, and, like throwing a baseball or hitting a golf ball, having a good jump shot is all about getting sort of a regular rhythm, and he hasn't had it, and I imagine that's the root cause of that, but again, there's just all the upside in the world. Now, I am probably more inclined to fade at the moment than play at the moment, simply because I do expect him to be popular right now, giving you a hint of the Awesemo.com ownership projections that you get access to. If you're a premium member of the site, he's the second highest owned player we have on DraftKings at this moment at 31% owned. I think that's actually ending up being a little higher. I'll peg him at about 40 when all is said and done, obviously depending on other news that comes out between now and the slate. And that's fine. He's too cheap at $4,500, but he has disappointed in similar spots several times this year. So if you're going to tell me he's 40% owned, which is where I'll put my spoon at the moment, and I'm building a lineup, I probably don't put him in it. There are a lot of other cheap, quasi-interesting, combo guards from Rodney Hood, who's also going to hold a lot of ownership in that position. Similar price, Bogdan Bogdanovic. Colin Sexton, Quinn Cook. You can spend up $1,000 to get up to Buddy Hield, who I really like in this spot. It just comes down to a personal decision. There's obviously any number of outcomes where he neither excels nor disappoints, and there's, him scoring 40 fantasy points against the Cavs tonight should bother no one. So that's all the information at hand. Go with God. You got to make a decision there. I think the field is around 40%. I'm sure it'll be north of 30%. So If you wanted to sort of punt the decision, you're playing lots of lineups, try to match that up. But I can totally see going with it. I can totally see going away from it. I will say if you're not playing James Harden, I really want to get some Eric Gordon in there. Past that, I don't really want to play Gary Clark. Certainly not out of play on a 7-game slate. The matchup is nice, but really more of a defensive snopper, but can fall into some stuff. I would rather run PJ Tucker. I would rather run James Ennis III. Minutes feel much more secure, certainly on Tucker, and quite a bit. But you could Clark in a tournament if you wanted to. Talking about the Cavs, again, they're shit. But there's good money in shit, as they say, and some of these guys are just priced very well. This is the first day I kind of like playing Colin Sexton, so when we take a second and look at the Cavs minutes last night, so Sexton managed to get out with 32, which is the second fewest among the starters. Nwaba managed to get out with 30, so I feel fairly secure you get at least another 32 out of Sexton tonight. He's pushed that up towards 38, 39, 40 other times. He's still $5,100. He's constantly getting, again, 32 to 40 minutes. Taking Chris Paul out of there really makes the defensive situation much better when the defenders are running into our Gerald Green and Eric Gordon and James Harden. And so, assuming you get significant minutes, is obviously going to take some shots. Put up 18 last night. Rodney Hood put up 20. Both those guys make a lot of sense for me. Hood, going to be popular, but probably a little less so than Gordon, probably similar to Cook. FanDuel, feel free to do it, but it's a little more of just, a tournament play, but has gotten 30 minutes plus, I want to say 3 games in a row. I shall click on his name and confirm that, but has just solidified his role in the rotation a fair amount and is generally taking a significant amount of shots. Again, 20 last night was more than we'd seen in a while. It was 10 and 11 the last 2 games. But I still like Rodney Hood just fine at $4,300 on DraftKings. Always going to be shot dependent. Last night took 20 shots, made 10 of them. That's more than you're frequently going to get when you look at fantasy point totals. You're looking at 34 in that last game and basically 20 in each of the last 2. But does come with some upside carries. So I'm just fine should you want to get some Rodney Hood up in your life. David Nwaba, $4,700 on FanDuel. I have zero interest because it's even so expensive that, you can drop it. Doesn't feel that great at $4,700. One of the things I've heard a couple times this year that's just wrong is, oh, crap, Draymond Green is out and I had him in my lineup. I'm not dead because it's FanDuel. No, you're dead. Just the same reason you still can't win a tournament if you get 0. You can't get a tournament if you waste $4,000 odd more than the next guy who dropped a guy. So you're still dead to win. You could still find some cash, though, but... Someone's like, I can still win. I'm like, no, you can't. There's the math with 500,000 entries. It's not going to work out that way. DK, 3,700. Okay, I can get behind that. It's really more of a cash punt for me. We saw a couple reasonable games where he had basically a 25 and a 30 earlier this week. Most of the time, he's a guy who gives you, 0.6 fantasy points a minute. He is not a great fantasy producer, as has been pointed out. This is not a position in which... this is not an overly fast game where you're picking up extra possessions. And if you looked at that last game again, you had the other starters taking 14, 14, 18, and 20 shots. David Nwaba took 4 shots in his 30 minutes. So cash on DK, no problem. Tournaments on DK, sure, because it's, 7-game slate and can randomly fall into a half dozen steals and blocks. And I can't spend this much time on each game. So, but this is a good game. Jordan Clarkson tournament's fine. Larry Nance, I don't think I would want to do it at all right now. Guy has massive upside per minute, but no reason to think he's doing much more than just playing the backup 5 minutes. Chetty Osman I like. Probably just tournaments for me. But, is going to play in the high 30s in minutes, going to take 15 to 20 shots. So basically, to rank these guys for tournaments, I would probably say... Sexton, Osman, Hood, Tristan in that order. Tristan I like quite a bit. I think Tristan's just fine as a mid-price cash game center. They're going to need him out there a little more with Capella. He's going to handle that deadly Harden-Capella pick and roll better than Larry Nance is, for example. So I think he has a safer floor and does carry a ceiling whenever he puts that much time on the court. Let's go on to another incredibly good game. Talk about the Pelicans and the Wizards. Most notable thing to talk about in this game is how ridiculously out of control the over-under is. The other games are ranging between 209 and I think 220. I think one of them might creep up around 222. The over-under in this game sitting somewhere in the realm of 240 right now. That's a large number. That's, significantly large, and some of these guys are priced fairly well. I don't believe, I'm going back and double-checking. And we have just everyone is still a game-time decision. Okay, and that's really funny. I said that and then was scrolling around, and on my tweet deck comes up Fantasy Labs, everyone is a game time decision. So, yeah, we are going to have some shit to pivot to. So, obviously, the big news here, Anthony Davis. I'm a huge fan of somehow wedging Anthony Davis into your goddamn lineup if you possibly can, if it turns out he's going to play. I'll give the odds right now of him playing at about 60-40. There's several things that make you think he will, several things that make you think he won't. He's he's obviously a guy who has some lingering issues, and the more tiny issues you have, they still add up. If you get a hip one day and a shoulder the next day and a knee the next day, the first two remain relevant when you're recovering from the knee. So I don't think he's 100% anywhere around, but he returned to the game last night, so it's got to be close, and they've still declined to make the call, and it's a game time decision. So I'll save some time here, but I'll go 60-40 he plays. For what it's worth. So if he plays, I'm a huge fan of his. If he plays, Drew Holiday, again, just fine in tournaments, because, again, the game is all over moon, and just fine in cash. His consistency of productivity is something we should all aspire to. I'll just go guy by guy in either situation. Etuan Moore, if Anthony Davis plays at that price, I'm still fine with playing in tournaments. There have just been multiple games, especially if Anthony Davis is just a little less aggressive. For example, if you look at that game last night, he went out and missed 10 minutes or so, came back with 3.5 minutes left and did nothing for most of it. Was not overly involved, so, was certainly less productive than you would see, etc. So maybe you have another chance of getting those random, we've seen 2 or 3 23-shot Etuan Moore games this year with, 25 to 30 real points. That can certainly happen, and this is not an environment where there's any reason to think it couldn't happen here. So Etuan Moore, probably just tournaments for me either way. Obviously more excited if Anthony Davis does not play. DSJ out, Matthews in. Thoughts on JJ Barea? So Dennis Smith Jr. Is going to sit with his wrist injury apparently. I will attempt to confirm that news, but I would find it odd that one of our... Yeah, there you go. Dennis Smith Jr. out. Wesley Matthews in. I like JJ Barea just fine. I like him especially on FanDuel where he's 42 or 4,300. He's actually a few $100 for dollars cheaper than DK. I will say that my largest concern with that situation is the only other game Dennis Smith Jr. didn't play this year was against Toronto, and they gave the start to Jalen Brunson, who played 30 minutes, and JJ Barea played 16, I believe. So I imagine you're going to get a blurb in these next 36 minutes that says Jalen Brunson starting. He's not an incredible fantasy basketball player, but just based on ownership at the late time this is coming out, and the number of studs. Whenever you have better studs, you have better value. It's sort of a weird synergistic relationship. We'll talk about that another time. I wouldn't have an issue throwing Jalen Brunson in tournaments. I wouldn't play him in cash. Maybe if he was starting, I would think about it. You'd want that starting confirmation. Right now, you can drop Jalen Brunson in a large tournament pool. You're building 10-plus lineups, play some Jalen Brunson in something. But the matchup with Boston, not something you're terribly in love with. And as far as Barea goes, I like Barea just fine. Still kind of tournaments for me. I could see cash on FanDuel because he's going to play 15 to 20 minutes probably. Maybe you get 22. Maybe you get 24. Has been playing up a little bit more recently than he had been earlier this year where they were really, really putting a serious ceiling on his minutes. I want to check this out to make sure I'm not speaking. Yeah, he played 29 minutes, but, and again, the nice thing there is it's the only team that's not on a back-to-back. So that's kind of exciting for you. That obviously Dennis Smith Jr. was hampered by that wrist injury in that last game, and Barea played 29 minutes. So because there's any chance of getting 29 minutes again, you're really excited. But I don't think you do, which sounds weird, but I think you are more likely to get 29 minutes with Dennis Smith playing than with him out, because I do think they give Brunson a start now, and I think Brunson gets 24 to 30, and JJ Barea gets 48 minus that number. So I'll get back to it when we get to that game. But Wesley Johnson, cash punt on DK only if Anthony Davis is out, basically. Not a ton of interest there. Mirotic, price still a little higher than for his recent form. But if Anthony Davis is out, I think he's a stellar tournament play. If Anthony Davis was out in 150 lineups, I would have 30 Mirotic. If Anthony Davis is in, I would have 6 or something like that. Anthony Davis himself, again, a monster. Barea or Eric Gordon? Right now, I would play Eric. I might play Barea and everything. I think I'd play Barea and everything. Just Boston sucks, man. Boston defense and Cavs defense are two very different things. But I will still hedge slightly towards Barea and everything at this point. Anthony Davis, again, if he's in and we get that news, the more valuable it is, the closer we get towards 7:30. If we get news Anthony Davis will play at 7:23 and you're going to get 3% owned Anthony Davis in a game that's got the highest over-under of the evening with basically no bigs on the other team, probably. That's a pretty amazing spot. It's a bet that will screw you 6 times out of 7, but that 7th time is going to be amazing. Barea, Arcidiacono. It'd be close in cash. Tournaments is definitely Barea. Arcidiacono, one of the rare. One of the things I do for the premium members at Awesemo.com is every day you get a curated tournament pool. If I go through every player I would have in 150 lineups and rank them all for cash in tournaments. Arcidiacono, one of the rare guys who is actually ranked higher in cash than tournaments. Most guys are inherently better cash plays. Not so with him, for he really comes with a fairly capped upside. But this is a good spot for him. And then the last guy, Julius Randle, fine in tournaments, has had some massive, 23, 10, and 8 games off the bench, even with Anthony Davis in, and really, really good, especially on FanDuel, where he's dollar for dollar the same price if Anthony Davis is out. I'm not going to play Ian Clark. I'm not going to play Frank Jackson. Darius Miller, if Anthony Davis is out, becomes playable in tournament lineups. It's still hard not to like these prices on Wall and Beal on DK. The ceilings are just massive. Obviously, the team is in disarray. There's any number of ways they can fuck it up, but the pace is huge. You tend to get, again, these teams only play a couple times a year and the personnel change around, so my best guess is you do get Drew Holiday spending more time on John Wall for that reason at his prices where he's $1,100 and $1,400 cheaper. I do slightly prefer Brad Beal here, but $8,500 John Wall can obviously get you 60 on DraftKings in a game with this kind of pace. And the more you run those guys, the more you want to run it back with the other team because you really want this game to stay close for them to get their nut on. Kelly Oubre, I expect to start again. $4,400 on DK now that the ownership will be a tolerable level and all the chalk isn't onto him, is fine in tournaments. Again, he's worse when he is starting, as we said that day, and hopefully saved people a fair amount of money. The Otto Porter price is a little higher than I want to go, but that being said, again, 240, it's not hard to imagine him making a pile of 3-pointers here and getting there. Don't hate, don't love, but, if you want to have Otto Porter, that's great, but I wouldn't feel bad if I didn't. And I don't think we have Dwight Howard news yet. In the low 6s, I'm pretty interested in that in tournaments. I'm not as excited to jam him in at low ownership as I am Anthony Davis, because again, the matchup is a little more fierce there, but a decent chance he goes here. Markieff Morris, especially on FanDuel, I like very much in tournaments. $4,200 on FanDuel is really cheap. You can get away with some very nice sort of floor plays with some real ceiling there. We're playing like Markieff and PJ Tucker on FanDuel and get out of that position for $8,500. I would rather play either of those guys than Jeff Green on that site. Jeff Green, a little bit cheaper on DK, like him a little bit more there for that reason. Thomas Bryant, I'm fine with throwing out. Again, he's probably going to play about 20 minutes. He's probably good for around a fantasy point a minute in this area, but there's a lot of variation in those numbers. Pace is to the moon, and he can do blocks, rebounds, all the fun stuff, and give you 30 in 20 minutes. He can also get 6 fouls in 9 minutes against Anthony Davis. So just tournaments for me, but wouldn't mind having some punt exposure there. Going to move on to the next game just to keep it rolling because I want to touch on everything before we run out of time, and I'm sure more news will come in. So let's talk about Oklahoma City and the Nugs playing in Oklahoma City, which better than the alternative, to be sure. Looking at our handy-dandy box scores from last night, you can see we got a lot of run out of the Thunder starters, 32 to 37 minutes. Schroeder being at the bottom with 32 there. Again, Hamidou Diallo almost blew up his leg. T. Ferg is out for, I think, another week or two. We got a smattering of minutes for Timofey Luwawu-Cabarrot getting 7 and Alex Abrinas getting 7, but that meant that we had Dennis Schroeder moving into the starting lineup and getting 32 minutes. I like that, where we're now going to get that many minutes out of him. Now, I think last night sort of a ceiling game out of him. I don't think he continues to get 19 shots up. He took one more shot than Westbrook. I imagine long-term that's not how at least Westbrook wants to see that distributed, but certainly interesting in tournaments for me. And again, a lot of people are going to be dealing with all these pretty sexy $4,500 guys. There is a big ceiling for Schroeder, even at 6K. 23 real points last night, 19 shots last night. Didn't happen to get any steals, didn't happen to get any blocks. Still ended up north of 30 fantasy points, made 4 threes. I'd have him in my tournament pool, I guess, is the long and short of that. It is what I consider to be a very good matchup for Russell Westbrook. They played 4 times last year. In the first game, I'm going to load it, but the first game Russell Westbrook was bad, and then he did all kinds of sexy things. In the last 3, let's cue that up. First game last year was pretty bad in Denver. The other 3 games were 38, 9, 6, 3 steals, and a block. 20, 21 assists. 20 points, 21 assists. Missed the triple-double with 9 rebounds, but 21 assists at 1.5 apiece. That seems like a lot of fantasy points. And 33, 13, and 9. Missed another triple-double by a rebound, but has been fairly good and looked very comfortable smacking Jamal Murray around. And again, if you go back a couple years, he had his 50-point triple-double. Yeah, that was against the Nuggets. So not concerned with the upside being there. We'll just summarize it as that. So yes, this is a spot in which you can get 90 out of Russell Westbrook. And with all the news, I think Harden comes in really significantly higher owned. So I'm just fine if you spend that money on Russell Westbrook. Obviously, some negative correlation with Dennis Schroeder and Paul George. Paul George, when he's down to 8,300, still coming with a pretty safe near 40-point floor and can do all sorts of steals and 3 things to get on top of that. Don't like Steven Adams in the spot. Steven Adams does not do well against the Nuggets, does not do well against Nikola Jokic. I don't know if he ever has, but I have him with 2 minuses in my notes, which is shorthand for me. Don't go there. So I thought it was a very bad matchup and it didn't look good. There's a video note, so yeah, don't go there. I would rather play Jokic. I would rather play Towns than Jokic at their similar prices. So if you're in a Towns-Jokic quandary, I end up on Towns there by a little bit. But certainly Jokic still very much playable in tournaments. I have concerns about minutes. So a couple of reasons that I do prefer Cat Daddy there, but certainly very much in play. They managed to go a little lighter on their starters last night. I mentioned that Orlando travels badly and has always traveled very badly in Denver, and that continued last night. They got shellacked pretty well, as I mentioned during the show yesterday. So you got away with only 25 minutes of Gary Harris, who is still questionable. Jamal Murray played 36. He gets a ton of minutes. I like Jamal Murray. I kind of like Jamal Murray with Gary Harris, so I wouldn't be overly concerned if you just have Jamal Murray in a lineup right now and not worry too much about what goes on with it. A little bit of foul trouble, but for that and other reasons, you only got 23 minutes out of Jokic, only 24 minutes out of Millsap. And Murray 36 is actually not, that's around his average, maybe a little under it. So if you look at the right sample. So I'm not concerned with the minutes for the guys on Denver, near compared to other teams. So you feel pretty good about that. I think Monty Morris is the guy you want most off the bench if you are looking at the value here, if you're thinking about a blowout, if you're thinking about Gary Harris out. He sort of fills all those roles and isn't dreadful even when none of those things happen. He played 26 minutes last night. So if you're sitting here going, I don't know what to do about Denver and we don't have this news yet, Horford and Rozier game time decision. Monty Morris, I do think the correct way to go there. If we find out Harris is out, that makes Beasley a pretty strong tournament play for me. He would be the guy I would move to in that eventuality. As far as the Thunder go, I did mention Jeremy Grant on DraftKings only at 4,400. Big fan of that price. Going to play 30-something minutes. 4,400 is just still too cheap for him. Let us go on to the next game and discuss the Timberwolves and the Bulls. Again, I already alluded to the pretty significant minutes that we got out of the Bulls in last night's contest, with 2 of them playing 40 minutes and 1 of them playing 39. And they're on the road into Minnesota as part of the Thibodeau Bowl here. So, long story short, I'm a little sketchy on the Bulls. Now, We've been dealing with some increased minutes and some increased usage, and Chandler Hutchinson, do we have an out? Is he still game time decision? Let me find oddly important Chandler Hutchinson. Still game time decision. Everybody's game time decision. Got it. But that ends up being fairly relevant because he ends up backing up a couple different positions, and when he isn't doing that, you get dumb minutes out of both Jabari Parker and Justin Holiday. 2 games ago, we got a massive game out of Jabari Parker, and last night's was very good, so Wednesday and Friday. Again, all these teams, by the way, on back-to-back, they're also all on 3 and 4s, which is even worse for what it's working at. So of the 14 teams playing tonight, I think 11 are on 3 and 4s. I think just 1 didn't play on Wednesday, but played yesterday and today. But most of them also on 3 and 4 games, and that's, another concern there. So I'm not shocked if nobody plays more than, say, 28 minutes up for the Bulls tonight because they get wicked blown out. Not super likely, but there's a double-digit percentage chance that no one on the Bulls plays 30 minutes. I would place a bet at like 6-1 or something. It wouldn't shock me. I can see that happening a number of ways. They still carry a lot of upside. This Minnesota defense has been awful this year. Not Cavs awful, but pretty goddamn bad. So, Zach LaVine seems perfectly like a cashy play. He actually played the fewest minutes of the starters last night. I think that was sort of with an eye towards tonight. So feel free, cash or tournaments, play some Zach LaVine. Ryan Arcidiacono, more cash for me. Tournaments, I would rather play J.J. Barea. Again, we specifically talked about Justin Holiday. Spot's really good. Micro matchup is decent, at least. Not the best on the team. I would actually slightly rather play Jabari at his price, slightly rather play Zach LaVine at his price, but also the ownership is going to get busted all to hell, and we have about a 200-game sample size of who Justin Holiday is. I wouldn't get overly concerned with what happened last night, where he randomly got steals and blocks and double-digit rebounds and made more than half his shots from the field. He is volume-scoring guy. The reason to play him tonight and ignore the irrationally increased ownership is he's still just too cheap. At 5,000, 4,600, or at 5,000/4,600, those prices are just still too cheap for a guy who is going to get out there and play probably 35 minutes, most likely, 35 minutes plus, and probably jack up 15 to 20 shots in a really good matchup. So, but I'm certainly fine to pass there. Rocco or Jabari, I'm going to play Jabari at that point. I like Bob Covington a lot. Really enjoy the way he plays the game. One of the best off-the-ball movement defenders in the league, and what I mean just knowing what the hell is going on and moving around off the ball. But I do think you will get a game where he doesn't get ridiculous steals. Since coming over to the Timberwolves, I know he had 5 steals last night. He has had multiple steals, I believe, every game with them. There's at least a 3 and a 4 in there too. So at some point that will not carry forward. Not that he isn't going to average like 1.7 a game. He's a phenomenal steals guy, but we are seeing pretty good shooting out of him. That obviously isn't going to hold up. And again, he's playing incredible minutes, and so Timberwolves is Thibodeau. Nothing strange about that whatsoever. He lives to kill small forwards. You can ask Jimmy Butler and Luol Deng and other guys. But if this game gets out of hand, which again I'm not shocked by. He should be first guy ass on the pine. So with the price now up, I'm a little more inclined to play other people over Robert Covington. Always can play Robert Covington in tournaments. You can pay $6,800 for him on FanDuel because 5 steals is 15 points on FanDuel. That works fine. Taj Gibson a little more cashy than tournamenty for me. If I'm tournamenting around that price, I probably go with Dario Saric because he carries higher upside, but it seems more likely than not we're going to keep getting splits that give Taj that extra time. Not a particularly wonderful Wiggo spot, but, certainly because I don't think he gets the most of the LaVine defense the way they should swap that over. I think he ends up getting more of Holiday. But either way, once he's up towards, he's 7K on FanDuel. You can certainly do it in a tournament. It's the Bulls. The Bulls are terrible. Knock yourself out. But Wiggins not a guy who tends to run sweat block. I would rather play Teague, and I would certainly rather play Karl Anthony Towns, who's in a pretty stellar spot there. $6,500 for Derrick Rose is fine. At some point, I'm just going to have to say this 3-point shooting is legit. He's been a really bad 3-point shooter for his career. Like, I don't mean average, I mean bad. Like, he's 30% 3-point shooter. Apparently, he's taught himself in the offseason at the age of 30 after all these injuries. So bravo to him. And obviously, fine in tournaments, but just, I would rather play Teague in tournaments. I would rather pay up a little and play De'Aaron Fox on DK for only a few $100s more. There's just other places I think I would generally rather go than putting down the money on Derrick Rose tonight, and a not irrelevant injury risk back-to-back. Those things matter. I mean, the odds of any NBA player exiting a game on any night due to injury are, whatever, 2%. Derrick Rose tonight, it's 3.5. I mean, it is a relevant figure larger. Let's just move on. But yeah, this is a game I expect people to be generally pretty ambitious about targeting. Lots of guys are priced very well. And if it stays close, which is the most likely scenario, you're going to get some guys who really outproduce their prices here. I think I'm relatively a little softer on it than other people due to some of the minutes low. What I see is a fairly likely chance of blowout. Got to go faster, though, so we're going to move on to some other games, so hopefully we can get to some questions. Kangs and the Warriors. Again, the Kangs play tomorrow at home versus Utah, I believe it is. They're hosting. It's definitely against Utah. Especially on DraftKings, all the Kings are too cheap. So you can go 7 Kings deep until I have a problem with you playing anyone in any context on DraftKings. I think even cash. I guess Willie Cauley-Stein and cash would bother me a little. Bagley and cash would bother me a little. But I wouldn't view as the worst things I've ever seen. And the other 5 guys I think are just great. So Fox, Hield, Shumpert, Bjelica, Cauley-Stein, Bogdan, Bagley are just all priced too cheaply on DraftKings. Period. At least 2 of them are going to be very, very good. Maybe it's something like 4 or 5. But if you have a DraftKings lineup with no one on the Kings on it, that's fine. You're guessing they get their ass kicked. And maybe you get lucky enough for that to not work out, and somehow for Fox to still not be good, who would still play in the blowout, but to have Hield not shoot that great, and Shumpert and Bjelica share their minutes evenly with Bogdan and Bagley and Mason. Like, it could happen, but better likelihood is some of these guys are going to maul their prices. De'Aaron Fox is $7,000. He's only $7,900 on FanDuel. I really like De'Aaron Fox. Buddy Hield, $6K on FanDuel, $5,500 on DK. I like him a lot at those prices. Generally been good against the Warriors, and is just, should cost $1,000 more than that on both sites. $3,600 Shumpert on DK. Just steal 3 upside, all kinds of great stuff. Bjelica's just under 5K on FanDuel, $4,200 on DK. AD out. Okay, yes, I got it. Oh, okay, everyone, take her easy. The beeps. Oh my God, wow, nice job. I mean, I asked you guys to be my Jimmy Olsons and give me some news. Literally, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people throw it down in chat, 3 private messages, and a tweet. So at least 12 people informed me within a 10-second period. So well done, team. No jokes. Well done. All right, so readdressing that situation real quick. I really like Julius Randle. I really like the game a little bit more because now it really pretends to stay close. Huge fan if you can get Drew Holiday into your lineups. We went through all this already. I'm gonna click back on my notes just to make sure I don't leave anything terribly short here. But now a big fan of playing Dwight Howard if we find out he is in. But I guess by order of acclamation, Randle, Holiday, Mirotic. Yeah, Randle, Holiday, Mirotic is the order in which my socks are rolling up and down. It now puts Check Diallo in play. It puts Darius Miller in play. Not super thrilled with either of them. The production should really be centered on those other 3 guys, but they now become perfectly passable tournament plays. Probably Ian Clark over Frank Jackson at this point, but don't really want to play either of them. Wesley Johnson, a fine cash punt at this point. His minutes should trend up by a few, and Etuan Moore, pretty good for me. I like getting some Etuan Moore in your life now. So Anthony Davis out. There's your news. The line on this game, the over/under will come down very slightly. The line is going to sit basically at a pick'em, I would think at this point. I think the Pellies were favored by 2 or something. And yes, it has now moved to the Washington being favored by 1.5 at home, but that's pretty exciting. How would you deal with shooting guard on FanDuel with? So I want to get to those other games, but shooting guard on FanDuel, yeah, you can play Harden. If you want to spend the money elsewhere and play Westbrook, then you feel very good about playing Gordon in one of those 2 spots as sort of some hedge off of your not playing James Harden. But after that, you can play $5,000 Justin Holiday, $6,000 Buddy Hield, $6,500 Dennis Schroeder. All those guys are fine with me in tournaments. $7,200 Clay, $7,500 Middleton, $8,000 Beal. All those guys are absolutely fine. But yeah, Drew Holiday at 8,700, probably the guy you are, I would think, most jacked up about getting in there and doing some real work for you. So I'm going to do speed rounds on these last couple games because thankfully they're a little less exciting. I still love Durant. You can play Durant in anything. If I'm building one lineup, I'm probably playing Durant and not Harden. Hopefully that goes as well as yesterday when I said if I'm playing one lineup, I'm playing Moutier and not Trey Burke. That was good. That worked well. I like Quinn Cook a lot. No problem with him on FanDuel. Really like him on DK, obviously, where he's under $5,000. Played 30 minutes in the last game. No reason not to think he doesn't do that again here. The matchup is stellar. Seems fairly safe in cash. Carries some upside. Hopefully the ownership stays down. Steve Kerr had some loving comments about Jordan Bell. So at his price on DK, especially if 3,200, if I'm looking for value Warriors bigs. Rozier in, no Boston value. Noted. Which is good. I didn't really want the Boston value anyway. But yeah, no Marcus Smart for you now. Time to go about your business. Spurs and Bucks, again, as prognosticated yesterday by me or anyone with a second-grade education, the Marcus Aldridge would not forget how to shoot a basketball forever after doing so very successfully for a dozen years. Went out and made 60% of his shots. I think it was not some completely ridiculous number, but put up a massive score. He's still cheap. His ownership will spike because he had a big game yesterday. It's not a matchup I particularly like. I actually like an under bet on this game, which is I'm 100% on bets this year, so see if we can get another one there. Brandon Forbes back under 4K. You can do as a punt on FanDuel. DeMar DeRozan at 8K is getting cheap enough. Again, we've had Bucks don't have a lot of holes, but you can frequently pick up from him at the relative 2-3 some pretty decent games there. Rudy Gay will be fairly popular. I have no issue with him at 6K. He is just legit underpriced. He should be closer to 6.5. Not a white spot, not a Bellinelli spot for me. Patty Mills would be the next guy I think I would go to as tournament guy. Tournament punt only. Bledsoe still pretty nicely priced, and I like the spot against the Spurs at the point. So 7K, that makes sense in tournaments for me. Brogdon would be just cash for me, but it's still priced very well for that. Middleton, if you're not playing Giannis, I think is strong. If you are playing Giannis, a little less inclined. The pace here just isn't as great as it could be. Brolo at $5,000 in tournaments works just fine. And of the punt guys off the bench there, I would do Pat Connaughton before I did Ersan if you were trying to find someone from that game for some particular reason. Just a sadist, I guess. On to our last game of the evening. We are going to discuss the Celtics we just talked about and the Mavs. Again, no value on the Celtics at this point. It's a fine spot for Kyrie Irving, who will have no ownership and has just beasted 70-point games against the Raptors. So just when he decides to do it, he's going to do it. And I think the ownership ends up being 6% tonight. And at that number, I have to like Kyrie Irving. So I think Kyrie Irving is just fine in tournaments. People are going to play Westbrook. People are going to play any number of other guards before they land on him. So at that ownership, he makes plenty of sense in tournaments, but he's going to disappoint you, 7 times out of 8. Jaylen Brown's fine for me at $4,200, even $4,500 on FanDuel. Basically just tournaments for me, but when you take Hayward out a couple minutes, flow to him there. Still, Morris makes a fair amount of sense to me. Basically, same thing, still just going to be tournaments, but I like that. And again, looking at some extra usage with Gordo taking a rest. Same thing with Tatum. He projects a little bit higher now. Horford himself at $5,800 makes a lot of sense. No Spurs being rested. Thank you for that bit of news. That was something I had some concern with. I didn't even mention it. You guys we're in mind meld right now, K-Shep. Very good job. Yeah, I'm a little more excited in tournaments about playing Kyrie Irving or Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum or Al Horford himself with Hayward out. You can play Baines again if you want. That's just fine. And Morris makes sense. But again, this is really just I landed on this guy in tournaments and he fit spot. Dennis Smith is out, as we mentioned. So yeah, JJ Barea makes some sense in tournaments. Why higher on Randall than Miro? mostly because it's a much greater minutes and usage increase. I'm not sure on the usage, but certainly the minutes and the minute ceiling comes in there. We looked at the game where Anthony Davis was out last time, and I said, I think Randall beats his minutes limit on the year where he hadn't played more than 28 minutes, and I said, I bet he gets 29 or 30. He played 39 minutes in that game. So just because that's a possibility here, Miro is, priced a little more appropriately, and I think I don't know. There's just a far better game. Like, we've started to see the assists out of Randall, and I like having him down by the basket. So just Randall a little bit more for me. Wall Capella or Miro Drew, cash and GPP. Probably Miro and Drew in both now. I mean, you should definitely find some exposure to Pelicans in this spot now. Markieff Hood or Monty Morris. Yeah, they would all project pretty similarly. Probably there I would end up going with, we don't have Dwight Howard news yet, I don't think. Yeah, so... But, yeah, I prefer Randall to answer the question. Gary Harris out. Okay. Feel free to get some Monty Morris into your life. Feel free to get some more Jamal Murray into your life. It does trickle down a little bit, but not a guy who'd been massively involved in the offense. He and Millsap trading back that fifth role in the offense role a lot of the time, with Barton out, then sort of the fourth role there. But we are running short on time, so I would say try to get some Monty Morris if you can. We will find out who is starting. There's a chance it's Morris. There's a chance it's Beasley. If it ends up being Beasley, don't fret. Your Monty Morris shares are not, wrecked. He's probably getting, at least 23 minutes anyway, probably closer to 28 in this particular situation. Beasley, the more fun, I want to take a shot at the title play here. He is, I think, $3,100 on DK. My favorite 3K-ish guy now, along with Jordan Bell, who's 3,200 there, played well yesterday. I really like the spot for him, and Steve Kerr talked him up a lot at the end of that game. All these guys just tournaments, but also having Harris out, not an irrelevant boost for Russell Westbrook and Schroeder. Can you go Jabari in cash? On DK, yes. On FanDuel, the price isn't quite as advantageous, but it's just a little too cheap on DK, so I can sort of stomach it. So you can. Don't really have time offhand to check and see if there's anyone. Monty Morris is better off the bench. Almost everyone in the universe is better off the bench, but it's a minutes play and now floor security, but yeah, everyone's better off the bench. So you'd go Murray Randall over Cook Capella and GPPs. Yes, I would. Bogdanovich, Barea, or Jaylen Brown, DK, GPP. Yeah, they're all pretty similar there. It's not going to be Jaylen Brown for me. It would be either Barea or Bogdanovich. I will go Bogdanovich for what I think is more advantageous ownership, but good question. Craig starting for Harris. Okay, so still Beasley doable in tournaments, but you're not getting the super bonus there. You're liking Monty Morris a little bit more now because he should project for some extra minutes. I don't think they run the string out on Craig more than like 18 minutes or so. So still like some Monty Morris, but again, don't kill yourself getting him in there where he's priced the same as Barea. I feel still a little bit better about Barea. Let's get in here. Is Bielitsa FanDuel GPP okay? Yeah, $4,900. Certainly a GPP is there's a way you can get on top of that. Would you play 3 Pelicans for tournaments? I'd be much happier doing so if I had a Wizard in there or 2. But yeah, I have no issue doing that. PJ Tucker or Markieff on FanDuel? I really like Dwight Howard news. So right at the moment, if I have to pick right now, I'll say PJ Tucker, but I like them both. One player on DK, 5,300 cheaper. You're confident in for cash besides Cook. Ooh, scary to say it, but I'll say Colin Sexton at 51. Is Todd Revenge even a thing at this point? No, I don't think so. Randall over Capella? For me, absolutely at this point. I think the ownership is better. I think that yes, I'm a much bigger fan of getting Randall in there. You're hoping Dwight Howard is out. If Dwight is in, it would be very close for me, but because of the reasonable chance Dwight doesn't play, I'm pretty excited. Miro and Cash on DK. Okay. At this point, anybody on the Pelicans is feeling a whole lot better. Well, I shouldn't say anybody. Those three main guys, without Anthony Davis, you're now distributing 40 minutes and 24 shots and just a metric ton of usage, all project much better than their prices. So by all means, Mirotic, Randall, whomsoever shall be found, get on in there. Morris or Hood on DK Cash? I'll go with Hood hesitantly. Aldridge or Randall on DK Cash? I'll go with Randall at this point. I can't get away from it. It's too good. Keep the questions coming. I apologize if I get quiet. I'm just scanning for news. Thoughts on Shumpert for cash and for GPPs. Much a bigger fan of the DK price, but if that's what we're referring to at $3,600, I like him for both. He's just worth more than that. Like, he's probably going to get you 20. And he's had repeated games this year where he's randomly busted out, games into the mid-30s. This happened not once. I mean, I'll give you the Shumpert game log. Here's just Shumpert game log over the last X games. 22, 17, 22, 26, 16, 14, 21, 14, 37, 24. He's 3,600. Like, there's multiple games over 30 in there. There's over 35 in there. So, yeah, I like Shumpty Dance. Tucker, Markeith on FanDuel. Been through that a couple times. Yeah, taking questions in both channels as quick as I can and trying to scan for news. Thoughts on Wall? I like Wall a lot. I like Wall all day. You like him more now. You're getting somewhat of a large impediment the hell out of the lane. So yeah, John Wall. Very nice. No issues with Wall whatsoever. Yeah. Malik Beasley or Bell on DK? I would stick with Bell myself between those two guys if it's just if you got that 3,200 sitting around. Monty Morris and Morris lineup on FanDuel for all the money. Yes, feel free to play all the Morai that you can get your hands on. There are 3 Morai tonight. You can play... oh my god, no, there's 4. The one on Milwaukee is technically available. Jalen Morris. But if you play the other 3 Morai, I think that could work out just fine for you. FanDuel Cash, Cook, LaMarcus Aldridge, and Tristan or Murray, Bagley, and Randall. How does that math out the same? Feels like the second one would be much more expensive. But Murray, Bagley, and Randall, even though they're not guys that really strike me as super cashy guys, just a much bigger fan of that side of the shin. Do I like Chetty tonight? Missed that game. Yes, I like Chetty. Probably just tournaments for me, but still just too cheap for what you're expecting to get out of him. He's been chucking and looking good doing so. Like, you worry a little bit about blowout and various things, but yeah, no issues for me here. Going back, checking the other chat, awaiting other questions. I apologize if my hosting skills get worse at this point. I am just trying to keep track of everything. But yeah, Randall, Holiday, Mirotic, the order I rank all 3 of those guys. But they all rank too cheaply now. I would feel like any lineup without one of them is probably bad at this point. Towns and Randall or Durant and Stein. I'll go with Towns and Randall. It's legitimately been a tough spot for Willie Cauley-Stein. I don't have it up in front of me, but he's been generally not great against the Warriors. Obviously at 50, whatever the hell 100 he is on DK, that makes it very tolerable, and there is still a ceiling to be had there, and this is not your father's Warriors, and there's no Draymond, and so that can certainly work out. But I will still slightly incline towards the first of those 2 pairings, King Louis XIII. Murray and Thompson or Wall and Bogdan FanDuel GPP. That's Wall and Bogdan for me. Monty Morris or Hood. Yeah, I'm going back and forth on that. I think I'm going to stick with Hood, but very close. Rudy Gay, FanDuel GPP, absolutely great. Might have missed your answer, but Mirotic viable in cash? Yes, at this point. Thoughts on FanDuel punt play Kleber? Do we have... If we know that Dwight Powell is definitely out, I'm fine with it. I don't recall if we have that news. Sorry, I have most of it memorized at this point, but I'm fine if you maxi Kleber, though it strikes me as you could do better. Just sort of gut ruling there. But yeah, Torrey Craig getting the start. We've already discussed that, answered that. Who do you have for tonight with the Pelicans and the Wizards? I would probably build around Randall first. So I think, I'd like to be under on Capella. I don't love a ton of the other center options. So Randall probably the first one in there, but also have a metric ton of Holiday, even at his price now. Without Anthony Davis, that can end up going extremely, extremely well for you any number of ways. And then trying to find a way to get some Muro into my life. Harden 21% on. Did we get to lock and I didn't miss it? And I missed it? Hey, we're there. We got to lock. All right, Harden 21% on. That strikes me as insanely good for people who have James Harden. Like I'd have to sit down and look at it for a while, but my projection for Harden would be, I think, just short of 60. But it would be just doing most of it in my head. 57 to 61 would be my projection average for James Harden in this spot. I don't like if he's legit. I'll do a quick version of Daddy Like and take a look at DK ownership if I can. Let me make sure the only account I have access to is actually in any tournaments. Okay, let's see what we got. Yes, we're in the $425,000 Big Jam, and we will take a look at some ownership here. Yeah, Harden 20%, 19.7% in that tournament. So shout out to the ownership projections. So I vastly overestimated the internet here. Like I really thought you'd get like 50% ownership. We'll see. Maybe it won't work out. It's going to require something pretty weird for it not to do pretty well. But yeah, if you told me it was 20%, I'd have windmilled 100% James Harden without Chris Paul against the worst defense in the NBA. Like I don't. Maybe there are factors here I'm not considering, but it's James Harden against the worst defense in the NBA with no Chris Paul and lots of other guys out there with him who, either Capella are reliant on Harden to create their shots, which is fine, or are PJ Tucker and James Ennis who are reliant on James Harden to get their shots. So it's going to require something pretty weird for that not to work out. So anyhow, let me download that ownership and answer a couple premium questions while we were at it. What was your take on Luka? Yeah, I did not actually mention Luka Doncic once by name, which makes me sad. For he's in my top 2 or 3 guys to enjoy watch playing basketball right now. Feel good that all the people who told me I was wrong and he was overrated. Yeah. So Eric Gordon 40%. Yeah, that's about what we expected there too. It's funny. I had 50 for Harden and 40 for Gordon. It ended up being 20 for Harden and 40 for Gordon. So still not quite sure how I'm twisted up there. Again, at 40%, as I mentioned, I would want to go the other way. That's actually the number we talked about the whole time. That was good. I give myself credit for that one. I looked at the ownership projections. They said 31%. I said, I think it's actually 40. It's 39.7. But at 39.7%, yes, I would look at some of these other guys. I would play Hood. I would play Bogdanovich. Just because he has all the ceiling in the world. I'm not shocked at all if you get 40 out of Gordon tonight and he's incredibly important. You needed him in everything. And it's a real possibility. But this is like, the 4th time he was in this spot this year. And he failed every other time. So, I kind of want to see it. Second highest owned, Clint Capella, 21%. Okay, a little lower than a lot of people were thinking. Makes me less happy with windmilling Randall in there, especially with more time coming now and people can pivot in there. Chetty, 16%. Tristan, 13%. Rodney Hood, 11%. That's less than I expected. Sexton, 6%. Like, it's funny. Colin Sexton has been over-owned every day of this year. At 6% today, he's actually under-owned. He should be more owned than 6%. He's going to play into the mid-30s in minutes. The matchup is pretty good now at this point, actually. The Rockets' defense is getting a lot better, I will say. But Luka or Fox in a tournament? That's really as usual. I do project Fox for a little bit more, but Luka, the ownership is going to be a little nicer. So to me, that would come down to how risky you want to be, what other correlation you have with other guys in that lineup. But that would generally be pretty similar for me. PJ Tucker, 3%. James Ennis, 3%. David Nwaba, 3%. These are DK prices again. Clarkson, 1.7%. Gerald Green, 1%. Michael Carter-Williams, 0.8%. Larry Nance Jr., 0.6%. Gary Clark, 0.27%. Chris Paul, 0.22%. Congratulations, you played yourself. Carmelo Anthony, honorable mention, 0.17%. Congratulations, you also played yourself. We'll sit here and do questions for a little bit because we might get some news. And again, we had only one 7:30 game, and most of y'all are playing on the DraftKings, so you can make changes to all this for quite some time. So I will stay on, maybe not until 8, for a little bit longer. Harden is 20% and all your cash ranging from $5 to $530. Should you be happy or worried with 100% Harden? I would be thrilled. Like, you just win, like, if he gets 65, which again, he had, 70 whatever recently against Detroit, which is not nearly the matchup of Cleveland, but not a hell of a lot faster. You can just end the evening, and he has a much safer floor than any of these other studs. Giannis can go sideways much easier. Giannis can get 65 against the Spurs. He's had a good game in his career against the Spurs, I think. But it's the Spurs, and they do a pretty good job of shutting down option number one, much like the Warriors and other guys. So, a little concerned about Giannis. Durant can obviously go sideways. You can get a blowout there, or he can just play as shitty as he has 4 out of his last 6 games where he forgot how to shoot a basketball. Harden's going to have to try really hard to fuck this up. You went with Harden over KD and Cash. You should have. Good job. Tournaments is a very interesting question for me, though. Tournaments, I would have gone Harden to at this ownership. I expected Durant to be much lower owned than James Harden. He just isn't. And hey, I'm one guy. Maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe Harden is not the windmill slam dunk I see him to be, but I'm looking at any of the things that cause me concern when looking at matchup, and none of them are there. I'm not worried about usage. I'm not worried about what the coach does with him. I'm not worried about an individual defender fucking up his day. I'm not worried about him randomly not getting the shots. I'm not like, there's almost no way this game can play without weird foul trouble, a sniper being involved. Like, it's going to have to be something pretty weird for you not to get 50 out of Harden. And 60, 70 don't surprise me at all. So, yeah, we'll see. Okay to go Miro, Randall, and Drew together? Sure. Again, I really want to have a couple wizards in there, or at least a wizard in there if I can. So try to get Wall in there if you have the money. Try to get Beal in there. Try to get fucking Kelly Oubre at $4,400 if it's a DK lineup in there. But try to get some exposure. Yeah, it's weird. I literally have shit on Sexton every single day that he's played this year, and yesterday was the first time I was legit wrong, I guess, or I don't know if I was wrong, but it was the only time that the advice didn't work out well on that day. You can't be too results-oriented, but Sexton had his first time that he paid off his price and you were happy yesterday. He had, I think it was 36 or so for his 5,200. That's pretty good. And now is in a spot I like a lot, and you take CP3 out of there, and played fewer minutes than most of the starters yesterday, and I actually like Sexton a bit for the first time, and he's actually under-owned, so we will see how that goes. Let me check the YouTube chat. Anthony Davis is out for tonight. Yes, he was. Thank you very much for mentioning that. Harden is 20% even in the 1K GPP. Yeah, I when I see this kind of information, I presume I am wrong. I'm one guy. It's the same reason I don't like sports bet professionally and never tried to, because Vegas is lots of really good computers and lots of really smart guys, and I'm just, at most, one smart guy. So expecting me to be able to outthink them and beat their lines counting a rake and a vig, I don't think that's going to happen very often. It's sort of the same thing with crypto. People are like, man, why don't you get more into crypto? So I have no reason to think I can beat the rake. Like, why am I particularly advantaged in that contest? Like, I need a reason to think I'm... So, when I see, even in the 1K contest, most people not being all over Harden, I presume... most of the high-price guys are more invested in projections, and I'm sure they're looking at a lower pace, maybe his productive history on back-to-back. So I'm presuming I am missing something, because it's really hard for me to see Harden not scoring 50. And when you have a floor of 50, like, literally, I'm surprised if the score you get out of Harden tonight doesn't start with, a 5 through an 8. But anyway, Satoransky we didn't talk about. Yeah, they're making him a real part of the thing at this point. Nice cheap piece of that game. I think it's 3,500 on DK. Played 24 minutes back-to-back. Just another guy who the coach said, yeah, this guy deserves more time, and they're giving him the time. So, interesting to see what happens if you have Dwight Howard back, because that is going to crunch minutes as they move up. You get to run less of Markieff at the 5, and so less of Porter at the 4, and so less of... Be interesting to see what happens with Satoransky, but no issue with him in tournaments in a wicked fast game. Gay, Willie, Cauley, Stein, Horford, Jabari. Who do you like most for DK? Probably Horford from that list. I think the ownership is nice there. Safer floor than a couple of those guys. Probably raw points, I have to project Jabari on the top of that line a bit more than Gay, a bit more than Horford, a bit more than Willie Cauley-Stein. No Wall, no money kind of night wouldn't shock me. Like, but I don't know what else you want out of John Wall other than the Pelicans at 240 over-under with Anthony Davis not in there clogging the fuck out of the paint. So, I mean, I guess it might not work out, but it's got a pretty good chance of working out. So, we will see how that goes as that game gets underway in a bit. Went Wall, Sexton, Gay, Harden, Core. Hardcore. Nice. You actually have Sex, Gay, and Hard in those 4 guys. I don't know what I can do with Wall, but gotcha. Hard, Gay, Sex, Core for you tonight. Good luck, B-Rabbit, with your Core. Alright. Yeah, it's drying up a little bit. I guess I will take off. I will happily... Harden starts with a turnover. I could see how this is going to go tonight. My long-cultivated reputation destroyed on Harden missing in the can't-miss spot. Harden was lower owned because of the Pels and guys like Towns, Wall, Levine for a lot less. Yeah, no, I mean, everything is obviously price relative. First bucket of the game, Colin Sexton. Everything is obviously price relative. And so, yes, there is a real chance that if you get 55 out of Harden, you also get 47 out of Levine and 51 out of Towns and various other guys that still make him cost inefficient. But with the evolution of some halfway decent value there, that's less a concern. Like, points per dollar is important, but the better the value is, points just ends up being important. So there's a lot of slates where if, the top scoring guy on the slate scores 68 for 13K and the next highest scoring guy scores 61 for 11K, you still end up wanting the first guy, even though he's points per dollar more inefficient. It's a little weird that way. Dwight out. Okay. So, Jesus Randall. And then beyond that, feel better about Satoransky. Feel better about Markieff if you ran him. So, yeah. Not a ton else to add there. You can play Thomas Bryant now, obviously. Otherwise, that would have been a bad idea. Harden with 3 turnovers. Well, this has been an interesting evening. I love it. I'm still all about it, but this is really funny. Yeah, Harden with 3 turnovers in the first minute and a half. I wonder if any of them were offensive fouls. I don't actually have, the game loaded. Foul trouble is what's concerning me. Minus a point and a half or minus 3 points, I literally don't care much about. None of them were fouls. I couldn't give a shit. That's fine. I now have to reduce his projection. He's lost 2 minutes and lost 3 points, so now I got to project him for 55 instead of 59, but still feeling okay about it. He just got a steal and an assist. Hey, look at that. He's back over 0. See how long that took? So anyhow, so send me tweets if anything comes up between now. I will keep a close eye on the Twitter and the premium Slack at awesemo.com leading up until 8 o'clock. I will be back tomorrow. We will do this again, my friends. My pleasure as always. Bon chance, mes amis. Good luck in your contest tonight. Tweet me at the end of the day, win or lose. Let me know how I steered you right or screwed you up. My pleasure as always. Good night now.